Hey everyone, Hazel here. One of the biggest advantages of Genesys format that I don't talk about very often is that the decks are often quite cheap. As such, I've prepared 7 unique Genesys deck lists to share with you today, each of which costs $50 or less. I'll also teach you all about how to make a budget side deck so you can be ready to duel without breaking the bank. I have links to all the deck lists down in the video description so you can easily browse through them or purchase them, and while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe for more Genesys content. The first deck I want to talk about today is a longtime favorite deck of mine. I played this deck when the original structure deck came out in, 2012? I played this deck when the new structure deck came out in, 2023 or whatever. I love Fire King, and it is a cheap deck, and it is a fun deck, and it's actually pretty dang good right now in Genesys because original Sinful Spoil Snake Eye came down to 17 points, and that gives the deck a lot more consistency and a lot more power. Fire King is an archetype of big, fiery, tri-type monsters. They're kind of the original tri-type archetype, the Beast, Wing Beast, and Beast Warriors. They thrive on their own self-destruction, triggering all kinds of effects when they do so, floating in and out of the battlefield and destroying your opponent's cards in their wake. If your opponent's on a deck that only destroys cards, they're going to have a hard time against you because they're never going to be able to out any of your infinite guys that just keep floating in out of nowhere. The extra deck I have here is pretty generic. This deck is a very flexible deck in terms of extra deck. You can fit all kinds of other things in here, and the Mimighoul here is even a tuner, so you can even put like a Formula Synchron and just start going all kinds of different ways with the synchros, making level 10 synchros. Most of the deck list you'll see here today will be including the Mulcharmy Perulia as part of the non-engine lineup. I think Perulia is quite good right now, and it's also quite affordable. At any time, if you're feeling like the meta game that you're playing against at your local meta is a lot more weak to Fuelos and you have the money to upgrade, go ahead and do that. It's not super expensive to upgrade, but it is a little bit more expensive than Perulia. Non-engine in Genesys tends to have a lot of trends that flow in and out week to week. So whatever feels good to you on one given week might feel completely different to you next week if the local meta that you're playing in shifts. People also like to play lots of different pet decks, so it's really hard to predict exactly what the best non-engine is going to be. So feel free to mix and match and try different combinations of non-engine to suit your liking. The next deck I want to talk about is possibly the cutest deck that has ever existed. Just look at the little rabbits! Look at them! They have fruit! Who gave the rabbits fruit? This is Melffy, and it's a whole bunch of cute little critters that are playing hide and seek, and they're just scared little guys, and I love them. And I hope that you do too. When I say they're playing hide and seek, I really, really mean it. And their playstyle even imitates this because the way that they work is they all have these different trigger effects that happen when your opponent either summons a monster or attacks them with one. Essentially, whenever your opponent does something scary with their big scary monsters, your little guys are going to run away and hide, returning to the hand and triggering their effects. And then all of them have the clause that during the end phase, they can come out to play again, summoning themselves from the hand to reset all of their effects. Recently, Melffy received the Melffy Footsteps card, which says add up to 4 Melffy monsters with different names from your deck to your hand. It's an incredibly powerful card, and the turns are so short because after you play this card, it becomes the end phase, and you just summon your guys. You just play a spell card, summon all your monsters, pass. Simple turn, and then you get to play during your opponent's turn. This deck excels at playing during your opponent's turn. All these guys are all live during your opponent's turn, and you also even have Hop Your Squadron, which is searchable in this deck to do synchro plays on your opponent's turn as well. You'll also notice that Melffy has very, very, very few points allocated to the actual engine itself. There's 2, 4, 6, 8 points allocated to engine, and the remaining 92 points you can just put wherever you want. You can put whatever non-engine your heart desires. Of course, I have Perulia here. I put Nibiru in because we can afford it in this deck. We got Ghost Ogres. We got DD Crow, one of the best cards in the format. Just lots of really good hand traps. There are so many different ways that you can build the non-engine in Melffy. You can do breakers. You can do any hand trap that you can imagine, basically. This is even a deck that could play Ash Blossom if you really wanted. Overall, it's a very fun deck, very interactive deck, and perfect for anybody who's a fan of animals. The next deck I like to show you is Darklord. Back in my day, Darklord was a very expensive deck because the theming is so dang cool and the artwork's so cool that people were paying tons of money for it. Somehow, these days, it's a budget deck, and we can all rejoice because this artwork is truly sick. They're all themed around fallen angels. They're all dark fairies. It's very unique theming, and if you're into it, there's nothing else that quite hits like it. They also have a unique playstyle where they have a mechanic where they copy their own spells and traps from the graveyard and shuffle them back into the deck. So you have a very fun playstyle of using a card, then you can copy it again later or on a future turn. Darklord has very powerful interruptions, especially the first Darklord, which when you fusion summon it using the proper materials, it'll just blow up your opponent's hold forward, and yes, you can do it during their turn. And because the entire deck is fairies, you get to play the Heralds to help just get yourself over the finish line with that little extra negation that your opponent didn't expect. This is also the only deck that plays the Darklord Googolette in Engine, which is a card that searches for the Forbidden cards, which means that you get to search for Forbidden Droplet or Forbidden Crown or Forbidden Chalice or whatever, just all in Engine. Speaking of Forbidden Crown, I put it in the side deck here. You might have noticed that the points are at 109 out of 100. That's because these side deck options, this isn't really a side deck. These are just options for upgrades. The main and extra here does fit under the budget, but these are some premium upgrades that you can get to help fill out your deck list. Forbidden Crown is the first upgrade that I would go for if you could afford it in this deck. You just swap out the Forbidden Chalice for it and then cut some of the hand traps. It's a very, very powerful card, but it's also a very brand new secret that's played in advanced format as well. So, you know, just get it if you can. If not, not a big deal. Forbidden Chalice is very similar to it. There's also the Azamina and Saint Azamina package. This is much less expensive than Crown. To slot these in, you'll just slot out these two fusion monsters, the Starving Venom and the Mixalzia, the Confounder. No big deal. And then you can just slot these two in. This works as a super duper polymerization target. It's also just interesting removal in the deck. It's a pretty good package. Just know it's one of the first upgrades to upgrade with in this deck if you decide to pick it up. Next up on the list is Mimighoul. Mimighoul is a deck that has possibly one of the most unique playstyles in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! And they have a really cool theming to boot. They're all themed around mimics from like a Dungeons and Dragons dungeon. And the idea is that they're flip monsters, but they have bad effects. They have effects that you do not want to flip up. And the idea is that you summon them to your opponent's field and then force them to flip them, causing all kinds of chaos as you floodgate them out of existence with your field spell and Dimension Shifter. It plays on a completely different axis, locking your opponent down, dealing burn damage, and causing them all kinds of annoyance in the process. It's also one of the premier users of Bot Harder, which is a very unique breaker that just steals all of your opponent's monsters forever. All of the Mimighouls, of course, are level 1 monsters, so you can go ahead and use any of your favorite rank 1 monsters that you might have, or you can even combine them with your other favorite rank 1 strategies. Leerlusk is a very common deck to mix up with the Mimighoul deck. If you like Leerlusk, you can combine them. In this deck list, I've included the Sorcerer of the Swamp package, which you might not see in other Mimighoul deck lists, but I think it's a really cool new addition to the deck because it lets you go through the Horned Saurus and then get any field spell you like, which gives you additional consistency. Or you could also just flex into some removal options. If you want to be playing Dimension Shifter in Genesys, this is probably the deck for you. If you just like being annoying, this is also probably the deck for you. The next deck is B.E.S. Crystron. The decks on this list are all $50 or less, but this deck comes in at about half of that. This deck is pennies on the dollar. Crystron is a machine synchro deck with a very unique playstyle where you use your Crystron Tristeros to blow up your own synchros to float into more guys and swarm your opponent, before using your Crystron cluster on your turn and on their turn to recycle all your monsters to keep comboing on your next turn. Crystron plays well with so many different synchro archetypes, so you can build it in a lot of different ways. And in fact, it just got hit on the points list because it was so generic and being used in so many different strategies. The variation I brought to you here today has not only a B.E.S. engine to help start your plays more consistently, but also it has the Angelici engine to give you access to breaking the boards with that as well. It's sort of like a 3-in-1 threat deck with the Crystrons, with the B.E.S, and with the Angelici. Or maybe more like a 2-for-1 because the B.E.S is more of a starter engine. I've also included here some very powerful extra deck negation monsters. You can play both the F.A. Dawn Dragster and the Cyber Dragon Infinity in this deck. They both slot in quite nicely. Level 7 synchros are really easy to make in this deck, as are rank 5 Xyz monsters. Of course, if that's not your playstyle, you can go ahead and just swap these out for something more inexpensive and then just pump up the hand traps to, you know, put in your Charmies, put in your Nibiru's, that kind of cards. There are so many different synchro monsters that slot into the strategy really well. If you're a fan of synchro monsters, you'll have a lot of fun finding the best picks for this deck. I've selected some pretty good ones here, but depending on what you're facing in your local meta, you might want to switch them out for some different options. They've been releasing a ton of level 9 machine synchros for some reason lately, so you can have a lot of fun playing with all of those. Here in the side deck, you can see there's a Poseidra. This is a bit of a pricey upgrade, and it's a sideboard card, so it's not going to be something that you necessarily want to go for immediately. But Poseidra is a very powerful breaker in this deck. It has a lot of synergy. You'll just put 3 of it in your sideboard alongside 1 or 2 copies each of the Marksman and the Infantry to just as your material to just destroy your opponent's board. Very, very good breaker if you can afford the upgrade. Next deck on the list is Clown Crew, and it also is about half the price of the budget. So this one and the Crystron deck are the 2 most budget decks if you're more interested in that. Otherwise, I'll just show you this deck. It's a really cool deck. The play style is very fun. It's themed around a circus, and you have this feeling of juggling as you're playing the deck because you're a tribute summon deck, but your tributes come from the extra deck, but you get locked out of effects from the extra deck, and all your guys are just kind of flowing through the graveyard and flowing back into the extra deck, and your spells and traps are going to the graveyard and back to your hand and all over the place. You're literally just juggling all over the place as your opponent is drowning because you have infinite advantage and they have none. This is one of the few decks in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! That actually sometimes has to discard for hand limit thanks to this card, which draws you tons of cards in each of your end phases depending on what you've tributed that turn. The consistency of the deck also is largely reliant on finding this ritual monster, which means we get to play lots of generic ritual cards to help the consistency, and they all happen to be fairies, so guess what? We're playing the heralds in this deck as well. This deck will annoy your opponent so much because you're just going to be negate, 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 draw, 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 negate, 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 draw, draw, draw. You'll notice I didn't even include a full extra deck for this one, but that's because honestly, those slots don't really get used that much anyway. These Clown Crew monsters are very important. So is the Nerva. These two Xyz monsters help you get to the Nerva, and the other slots you don't really use because most of your effects here, they'll say like, summon 2 monsters from the extra deck, but you can't activate the effects of monsters summoned from the deck or extra deck for the rest of this turn. So there's not a lot you can really slot in that does a whole lot. So feel free to experiment with whatever you want, but there's not a whole lot that's going to do too much in that spot. Some people like putting the Red Ice Flare Metal in. That's a fun one, but I don't have the points here in this deck list. This deck also sports some of the funniest removal that you'll see because the monsters, when they're tributed, all have effects. And the fusion monster, when it's tributed, one of the effects you can select is shuffle all the fusion monsters into the deck from the field in both graveyards. And then the synchro monster does the same for synchros, and the Xyz monster does the same for Xyz monsters. So you get to just shuffle all your opponent's stuff back. If they're playing just like a synchro deck or an Xyz deck, you'll just destroy them in one activation that you can chain block, and you'll be laughing and laughing and laughing, and I'm sure they'll be crying. It's a very fun deck. I really do enjoy playing the Clown Crew deck. If you like tribute summoning and drawing cards, and you like playing during your opponent's turn, this deck, it will be perfect for you. The last deck I want to talk about here is Sacred Beast. Sacred Beast is in a, I'll call it a unique position here. It's not only a dirt cheap deck, but also it's the best deck in the room. Currently in Genesys, it is probably the most powerful deck. It's the highest rated deck. It has all kinds of variations that are extremely powerful. You can play it pure, you can play it with Invoked, you can play it with Testina, you can play it with Dark World. There are so many options. It bridges into practically any other deck that you could want. It's just really powerful, and it's really undercosted right now. And it just so happens that most of the cards are commons and supers. The only one that's not is the Chaotic Phantasmal Sacred Beast, which is just a cheap secret now. If you're looking to min-max your dollars and get the most powerful Genesys deck list you can for the lowest amount of money, Sacred Beast is going to be the deck for you. If you're looking to upgrade this deck, the first upgrade you're going to want to do is swap out these 3-eyed ghosts for more copies of Card of the Soul. Card of the Soul is a bit of a pricey card right now because it's an old card, hasn't been reprinted. Prices are kind of crazy on it right now, so if you can't get copies of it, it's totally understandable. But if you can get copies of it, definitely just swap out these 3-eyed ghosts for more copies of it. It's a very, very good searcher. And then you can also just start slotting in a whole nother engine into this deck. This is a deck that playing the hybrid variations of it is usually recommended if you can afford it, but that's going to be costing you more. So what I've shown you here today is an affordable, pure version of the deck that's still very, very powerful. You even get to play Varudris, which is an expensive extra deck card that normally you wouldn't expect to see in a budget deck list like this, but you actually can afford it in this deck. The Sacred Beasts themselves are these absolutely massive level 10 monsters. We're talking 4,000. 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 attack without sweating. They absolutely beat your opponent into submission and have very powerful effects, like the Uriah here can destroy a spell or trap and nobody can respond to it. Sometimes your opponent can't help but watch as you break their board and they cry about it. They also have one of the coolest boss monsters that's ever been printed in the Yu-Gi-Oh card game. 5,000 attack and defense. 3 times per turn it can't be destroyed, and 3 times per turn you can negate a monster on the field and then yoink some life points from it. Very cool deck. It's very fun to beat your opponent down with just 4,000 beat sticks. Always been a big fan of just the huge monster strategy in Yu-Gi-Oh, and this is a absolutely perfect example of it. You'll notice that none of the decks had actual side decks. That's because side decks are not only generic, but they're also going to want to be tailored to the local meta that you're playing in. I'm happy to suggest you 15 random side deck cards that you could play in your deck and you'd be fine, but I'd rather teach you how to build your own and give you all the cheap options to choose between. I have basically every one of the budget side deck options here for you, so you can just go ahead and browse through here whenever you want to get an idea what to side. I'll break it down into various categories though. The first category is the Kaiju and kaiju adjacent category. We have all your kaijus. We have the Santa Claus, the Lava Golems, the Winged Dragon of Ra sphere modes. These are all very good. Between the main and side deck, you're going to want to have at least 3 copies of this category in your deck somewhere. Almost everybody is packing 3 kaijus or 3 Lava Golems or something like that. The next category is there are just destructive cards, you know, like your Dark Holes, your Raigekis, your Interrupted Kaiju Slumbers, Pear Bear Scare, and Final Bringer of the End Times also fall into this category. These are all cards that help destroy your opponent's cards. Sometimes decks are weak to that, sometimes they're not. Right now, overall, I would say decks are not super weak to it, but depending on your local meta, that could be completely different. Kaiju Slumber, I've noticed, is especially popular, probably because of the graveyard effect, but also because it's a 0-point board wipe, which is quite rare. The next category is going to be non-destructive breakers. We have the Swords of Concealing Light. We have Book of Eclipse, which is like Swords of Concealing Light, but, you know, better. That's why it's 4 points. We have the Dark Ruler No More as well. These are all cards that help turn off your opponent's monsters without destroying them. Dark Ruler No More even has the advantage of they can't respond to it. A lot of people side these for when they're going second, especially when they're going to big combo decks to try to force through their combo. If your opponent ends on a lot of monster effects, these types of cards are going to be very powerful. The next category is back row hate. Cosmic Cyclone and Twin Twisters are by and far the most common choices here. If you have the points, Cosmic Cyclone is almost always chosen, but these are all good options. You also have the Hey Trunade if your deck is maybe more OTK focused and you're trying to just kill them instantly without giving them a chance to respond. MST, the classic MST, is still played, and it's still pretty good, actually. It's, you know, it still does what it does. And Typhoon is also popular because it works like a hand trap. So it works against field spells. It works against some other things. It can snipe some cards sometimes. Most people are packing at least 3 copies of Back Row Hate somewhere in their side or main combined. I would say the 2 most common things that people are running are Kaijus and the Back Row Hate. If you're going to be running anything, make sure you have 3 copies of each of those categories. And then the rest of it's more flexible depending on your deck. Another card I like to talk about, this is kind of in its own category, I guess. It's the Blizzard category. It's a very popular card to side in Genesys, though, so it should be mentioned. It's a spell card that negates other spell cards by returning them to the hand. It's really good. It can counter other breakers. Some decks, like if you're playing against, say, Hero and you Blizzard their Polymerization, it also prevents them from activating cards with the same name for the rest of the turn, so it just completely locks them out of Polymerization for the whole turn. Sometimes decks just completely fold to a Blizzard. Very popular card. Some people hate it, some people love it. Try it out and see what you think. The next category to talk about is hand traps. There are a decent number of hand traps that do something in the side deck that you might want to consider siding. Skullmeister is good as graveyard hate alongside Hekahan's Godos. Godos you'll see a lot more, especially in like Chimera decks or the decks that take advantage of the illusion typing. Artifact Lancea is still around if you're getting your teeth kicked in by Invoked, for example, or other banished decks. Artifact Lancea can come in to help save you. Gravekeeper's Watcher is a very powerful hand trap in this format because it counters specifically the Sacred Beasts deck. However, this one is a little bit more pricey depending. It's another old card. The prices have been kind of going haywire lately, so you may or may not be able to get this one on your budget. But it is very good if you can side it. I would say it's just one of the top side deck cards in this current Genesys format. Chaos Hunter is a lot like Artifact Lancea, except it's a fiend, so maybe that works better for you in your deck. The final category of cards to talk about is what I'll call going first cards. These are cards that you side in when you're going first. Often you'll side out your Mulcharmies to side these cards in, or you'll just try to side these in so your opponent can't even play the game at all if you draw enough of them. There's a couple different flavors of going first cards, but the 2 main categories I'm going to talk about are counter traps and then down here in the no-no zone floodgates. So for free counter traps that you might want to put in your side deck that are also cheap on the budget, you got the Unbreakable Xyz Barrier if you're playing an Xyz deck. You have the Paradox Fusion if you're playing a Fusion deck. Medianium Reframing if you're playing a Synchro deck. And Draco Utopian Aura can just deal with monster effects in general, regardless of the deck you're playing. Down here, we also have some affordable Floodgate options. If you are a Floodgate gamer, if you want to be a villain today, you can play Macrocosmos, still free. You can even search it with the Chaos Distill. Gravity Collapse works in Synchro decks to lock your opponent out of summoning for a whole turn. Non-fusion area, well, locks you out of fusions. Mask of Restrict is anti-kaiju if your opponents are kaijuing you too much or using sphere mode. Or if you are struggling with Clown Crew, Mask of Restrict absolutely shuts them down in a single activation. Eye of Truth and Mutually Feared Destruction are both similar cards. They both read, your opponent has to show you their hand, and while their hand is revealed, they cannot reveal their hand to activate their effects. This is particularly good against the Sacred Beast deck. It's also good against the Blitzclick deck or any other deck that has to reveal their monsters in their hand to activate their effects. Final card I'm putting here in the Floodgate category. It's maybe not quite a Floodgate like the other cards, but the Gravekeeper's Inscription, which is a card that you can activate to turn off the graveyard of your opponent for a whole turn. That's going to be it for this budget deck video. I hope you liked the options. Let me know down in the comments which your favorite was, and don't forget to subscribe for more Genesys content. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.